Hey, what's going on, guys? Episode 3 of StoryBoardEm. We're back with some more pitches for you guys. This time we've got pitch a video game movie sequel to promote the next gen consoles. So Zay, do you want to explain what these pitches are?
Yeah. So, hi guys. Basically, we all know the next gen consoles are coming up. We know there's been a lot of hype around them, a lot of publicity, a lot of big deals going on, and a lot of big new business models. I think we heard a little while ago Sony's ambitions to have Sony Studios as well. So this is basically just a blend of everything that's going on right now, and it's essentially just choose one current gen video game and pitch the movie sequel that would follow it.
Yeah, so this is a movie that's following on from a game that was on a current gen. So I think we're going to start off with Zay, if you want to go first and show us your pitch.
Cool. So I basically when I chose this game, I didn't intend for it to be an Xbox exclusive, but with the news that Xbox is purchasing Bethesda, I think it kind of has accidentally
I see where you're going.
An Xbox exclusive. So my movie pitch is actually going to be a sequel to the Fallout game franchise. Cool.
Wicked.
So yeah, without that, let's just get straight into it. So the movie is basically going to start inside a poorly lit room, and there's going to be sort of an old TV inside it, right? And it's going to turn on. You're going to see a bit of static, some white noise, and then the video is going to start playing. And essentially, this video is basically just going to be playing the Fallout lore, right? So it's going to explain to you that there was a big nuclear threat. Everyone was put into these vaults for their own safety, where they have to live until the government says it's safe to come out. And basically, the camera is going to pan, and it's going to show a little kid basically excitedly watching the TV with his dad. And the camera is basically going to pan back and forth between this audience who are watching it, which is always going to be two people, and the TV, basically showing how time is progressing, right? Each time they're just watching this same commercial, but each time it's a different set of sort of parent and child combo. And you can see it's got the that proper sort of propaganda style tone to it, right? Until finally we pan back, and it's just it's a little boy watching it with his mother, and then sort of fades to black. Cool. And now we switch to the main part of the movie. So the camera switches to our first main character, who is going to be played by Pedro Pascal, who you might recognize from some of the Narcos series, and he's Mandalorian. Yeah. And essentially, what he's going to be doing is he's going to be doing like a Star-Lord style run through of a jungle terrain. So when we first get introduced to Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, it's going to be quite similar to that, except he's going to be fighting a bunch of ghouls, and he's going to have a whole bunch of sort of weird weapons that he can sort of shoot and then throw away. Really just made of junk, like nails and hammers and toothbrushes, which is really like a key feature with the Fallout games, right? You just get to plaster a whole bunch of stuff together, make these unique weapons. So he gets to a vault door, and he pulls the doors open, and inside you see that actually the main character of the entire movie, standing alone inside that vault, is John Cena. So and
did you say you can see him standing inside the vault?
Yeah, this is the one a few times where you can actually see him standing alone. Yeah. So Pedro Pascal walks in, and obviously he's almost saving him, and he's taking him out of this vault. And so sort of they go on this journey together to walk back to a settlement, and on this way you sort of get a bunch of exposition, right? So John Cena sort of explains that his character's name is literally called Next, and he took the name from his mum when their dad left. He also mentions that he's got like a special watch that he's holding on to that's got a countdown on it, and this countdown is supposed to signify that it's counting down to the moment where his wife will arrive. And so Pedro is basically explaining. So Pedro Pascal's character doesn't necessarily have a name, so I'm just going to refer to him as Pedro. Explains that he explains the Fallout lore, that there was a nuclear holocaust. Some people have been exposed to radiation and become ghouls, but really this is a sequel to the Fallout game, so it's actually a way down the line. And it's been a bunch of generations, so everyone's basically evolved. And the ghouls, so they're semi-conscious in the sense that they can fight and they can use, weapons and machinery, but they're still, obviously, they don't have their consciousness. And to be fair, just the evolution has just made it so that they're not really a threat to anyone now. You even have sort of little kids who can sort of abuse the ghouls. And everyone else is mostly normal, sort of as they're walking. He also points out that there's this sort of cult of like anti-technology people who believe that sort of all the tech advancements that we've made since the sort of nuclear holocaust are evil, and it's only going to cause another nuke. So they keep walking until they, ultimately they come to a settlement, And Pedro ends up taking Next to a sort of mansion type, like almost like a plantation type. You have those mansions in the middle of plantations in the big fields. It's that sort of setup. And as they arrive there, there's a bunch of ghouls almost serving, in the plantation, sort of doing work and not attacking or anything. And it actually turns out that Pedro has sort of been luring Next here just to turn him in and hand him over, because he's a fresh vault dweller, so there's sort of a high value on these type of people, and he essentially is just turning him over to claim a reward. And so Next is tied up. Cool. So I think he's tied up next to another character who is our third sort of main character, and it's played by Alexandra Daddario, who you might recognize from I think she's in Baywatch, and she was in some of the early Percy Jackson films. So her character's called Alex as well, so she's tied up next to Next. And at this point, our sort of plantation owner, the guy who's in charge of this mansion and is sort of the leader of all these ghouls, who actually will be played by John Malkovich. He's basically saying that he's monologuing to these guys, right? He's saying that ghouls, they're now substandard beings, so they deserve citizenship, and that he's really a political advocate for them. And so that whole monologue goes, and he walks on. Excuse me. And then so we have Next and Alex sort of tied up next to each other. And Alex is sort of tied up because she's been causing a bunch of trouble here, and she convinces him, give me the watch on your wrist, which he wriggles out, gives it to her, and they essentially use that to escape, right? And then you've got a huge sort of big action sequence of them getting out, fighting a bunch of ghouls, and essentially escaping. And actually, as they escape, they run into sort of Pedro's character again, who's trying to make his way out, and they sort of grab him. And they're sort of deciding what to do next. Alex says, they should go to her dad since he can help. And so they end up in this sort of massive laboratory, some office-style building, and they're greeted by Alex's dad, who is played by Stanley Tucci, and he's supposed to be like a proper riff of Steve Jobs. So
Right.
sort of quite eccentric and sort of his tech head. He thinks he's a bit of a visionary, and so he gives a bit of exposition about how he produces tech to improve people's lives. And actually, he makes a proposition to our main character Next, and he says he has a house, a property that he can stay in, and so he can have full ownership of that, and he can sort of renovate it and prepare it for when his wife arrives. And in exchange, he just has to do a few tasks for him, in terms of there's some problems with ghouls coming and sort of stealing bits of technology, etc. And so they agree, and essentially, Next basically he's important that he keeps Pedro as a prisoner, because he'll need him to show him the way back to the original vault that he came from. So once the countdown is finished, he needs to go back there to sort of meet his wife. And so now you get a bit of like a semi-montage sequence of so it'd be like Next doing up his property, going on a bunch of missions, fighting ghouls, doing odd jobs, etc. And then interestingly enough, the ghouls they're arriving with new weapons that no one has really seen, but they're still sort of pretty easy to deal with. And the day finally comes, countdown. At the end of the montage, the countdown, it's now the day they need to go back to the vault to meet the wife. And they make their way there. Next is standing there, all vulnerable, really done up, quite nervous, flowers in hand. Alex and Pedro are also there waiting with him. Countdown hits 0 and nothing actually happens. So eventually, they realize that something's not right here, and they go to investigate. And they follow through the passage where the wife was supposed to come out from, and they keep going until they eventually discover an office, with a bunch of charts and documents in it, and is basically explaining that the vault that Next was in was actually one of the experimental vaults. So if you're familiar with the Fallout law, the government was supposed to set up all these vaults in the case of a nuclear holocaust, but a bunch of them they just set just to do random tests on humans. And it turns out that Next and his family were part of one of these tests, where they would start with a father and a child. And when the child would become of age, they would cryogenically unfreeze a spouse and release them. And then when that couple had a child, they would sort of take the cryogenically unfrozen person back, so that at any time it's mainly just going to be the parent and child in that vault, which it's pretty twisted to do. And at this point, there's another sort of ghoul action sequence where a bunch of ghouls attack them and swarm them, and they manage to fight them off and escape through a different hatch, and it leads them to the back of a lab. And soon they realize that this is Alex's dad's lab, and he's been sort of supplying the ghouls with these weapons, and he's actually the bad guy. And once again, sort of ghouls come and attack them, and they're overwhelmed. until they come across one of the staples of the Fallout franchise, which is the power armor suit, and they use it to sort of sort of pilot that and use it to escape. So at this point, we know that sort of John Malkovich and Stanley Tucci's characters are working together, and our team of heroes, they basically plan an assault on them at the mansion. So they rally the general public, and everyone sort of creates these weird weapons and traditional sort of Fallout crafting, and essentially the fight happens. So they all go up to the sort of mansion / house, just as it's a big war, and as our heroes are losing, and the public is losing to the ghouls, the cult of anti-tech people sort of storm in with a bunch of even crazier made-up weapons. So again, made like toothbrushes and brooms and stuff, and they sort of join the fight. At which point John Malkovich jumps down in his own power armor, and he comes to the battlefield. So now you got John Malkovich fighting in a power armor suit, right? Fighting against all these people together with the ghouls. During all this commotion, our heroes next, Alex and Pedro, they make their way to the top of the mansion to confront Alex's dad, who actually has been revealed that he actually is a ghoul, and he tells them that the reason why he's the one that basically had that whole relationship with Next and his family, because he's actually one of the overseers of that vault. So Next is furious and he throws his watch at him, which breaks and sort of liquid spills out. And this is where it's a bit far-fetched, but you just have to go with me here. So we're saying that because the watch, including the liquid, was sort of pre-nuke, it's not as radiated. So Stanley Tucci as a ghoul, he sort of laps up that liquid, and his super accelerated ghoul molecules basically react to it, and it just gives him a super boost. So he's now basically a super ghoul. And the rest of the film is just basically them fighting him off and struggling to fight him off. But just at that point, then John Malkovich arrives in his power armor suit, and now it's like, it's game over. They can't even deal with super ghoul Stanley Tucci. How are they going to fight power armor John Malkovich? But John Malkovich basically says that his angle was fighting for the ghouls because they were oppressed, and this super ghoul doesn't fall into that category. So he actually joins them. He joins forces with our heroes, and they all work to take out the super ghoul. And they eventually defeat it with obviously Alex landing the emotional killer blow to her dad. And then sort of this is right at the end of the film. Then our four heroes, they walk out to a balcony, sort of overlooking everything, and they're talking about that's it, they've won. What's next? And each of them for next, he needs to figure out what to do with his life. Pedro, he doesn't want to be a criminal anymore. He wants to turn a new leaf. Alex also needs to figure out what to do. John Malkovich saying he's not going to stop campaigning for the ghouls because they still deserve rights. And then this is just when the camera pans up and you see, there's still just total chaos happening below them. There's still a literal war going on between the anti-tech people, the ghouls, and the regular public. And all four of our heroes basically just jump off the balcony and they re-enter that battlefield, and that melee is just still ongoing. And that's just where the credits roll. That's and one thing, who's going to be the director? I said George Miller, so who done the Mad Max Fury Road? Because I feel like he's going to give it a real sort of post-apocalyptic sort of look and feel to it. Together with I don't know if you can tell, but it's supposed to be quite of an outlandish comedy as well, similar to like the Zombieland films. But that's the pitch.
Wicked. That was good, man. That was a good pitch. I like George Miller as the director. That was a really good shout there. Obviously, a very great Mad Max feel to the whole Fallout series. Just a question: do you know Fallout lore? Have you played the games?
So I've played Fallout 4, and I had played it a little while ago. So I literally had to research the lore before this game.
When you say the guys watch, do you mean a Pit Boy?
Oh yeah, I could have just used that, right?
I thought that's like literally the main thing in the Fallout series is the Pit Boy.
Yeah, completely slow.
Yeah, you left out Vault-Tec as well, man. Vault-Tec are the guys who did the experiments.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, and like there's bits where you sort of uncover the lore and stuff. That's
also the ghouls. In Fallout, there's two types of ghouls, right? There's the sentient ghouls, and then like the villain ghouls, like the evil ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which one's for yours?
Well, so this is like the title of the film, because it's a sequel, right? It'll be like Fallout Generations, where it's like a couple generations since the initial event.
So there is no more of them, like the sentient ghouls. They've just like become extinct.
Well, the ghouls themselves are just like they're then just now like these pathetic creatures where it doesn't really matter, like just about them. They really can't do anything. So yeah.
Yeah, good pitch, man. I really like your cast as well. That was a good cast.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wicked.
I was dead certain that I wanted John Malkovich, definitely just because he looks like the type of guy that would just have an army of ghouls.
He
And
is
Stanley
such like a
Tucci, because
ghoul master.
yeah, Stanley Tucci, because I really wanted that Steve Jobs, rip off.
Yeah,
But
sick.
then just as I was writing it, and there's that bit where John Malkovich appears in his own power armor suit, I was just like, how did I not think of this first and just write everything else around this one, action point?
That moment when he gets in that power suit, that sounds awesome. Yeah, John Malkovich, yeah, wicked
Yeah,
actor. That's a really good cast. I do like Pedro Pascal as well. I think would be from The Mandalorian. I think he'd just be wicked in any kind of post-apocalyptic
yeah.
setting. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That was
Cool.
awesome.
That you ready to jump in with yours then?
I am ready to jump in with mine. If you want to go to the next screen, I'll show you. Mine is a sequel to Uncharted. So,
Okay.
mine's going to be a sequel to Uncharted 4. So I know there was a like DLC kind of
Yeah,
sequel to
the
Uncharted
expansion.
4.
Yeah.
But I'm picking up on from Uncharted 4. So it's following that. So because I didn't
Is
get a
it
chance
is
to
it
play the
right at the
expansion.
end? So guys, yeah, sorry, just a quick spoiler alert here. But yeah, right at the end. So as in with
Yeah,
it and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
my whole pitch is going to have spoilers probably for the whole Uncharted series. Um, I'm not gonna in detail go through any of the Uncharted series, but it will have spoilers. Obviously, you'll know who survives and who dies and such. So if you haven't played Uncharted and you want to play Uncharted, you definitely should because it's an amazing series.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously skip my pitch until you finished the Uncharted series. So I'm going to start off by quickly running through my cast. Obviously, I'm going to use the characters from the game. So they will be all the established characters. So if you go to my first person, for Nate, I've cast Brett Dalton. So you'll recognize him from probably Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is his most famous role.
Ah, okay.
I think at one point, I believe he was considered for Nathan Drake in the movie. But then I think obviously that movie went through about 10 iterations, and I think we've ended up with Tom Holland somehow. But my movie's nothing to do with that movie. It's just a fresh take. And so my next person will be Elena, and that'll be Katie Kukos, who's from obviously Big Bang Theory, Penny. So that's who I'm choosing for her. The next person will be who you see right at the end of Uncharted 4 and you play as, which is their daughter, Cassie. And I actually have cast the person who amazingly voices her in the video game is Caitlin Dever, who has since become a famous actress. So if you've seen Booksmart, she was in that, and she's really good in that. And she's in a few other movies. So I've cast her in that. It's just a crazy coincidence. My next person, so for Sully, I have cast Brendan Fraser, who you will know from the Mummy series. So I know he doesn't look like that anymore, but this is basically if you were imagining Nathan Drake now, it would be that picture. And if you imagine Brendan Fraser now, it would be Sully. So it's kind of that's like a young Nathan Drake. So an old Nathan Drake is basically Sully. So an old Brendan Fraser I thought would fit. And also, he was in The Mummy, and it's basically the same character. So I thought he'd be a good fit for Sully. My next cast, so for Sam, I've chosen Anthony Starr, who is Homelander in
Oh,
The
okay.
Boys, if you've seen that. So he'll play Sam. Sam is Nate's brother. So he comes in Uncharted 4. He's going to play Sam. And my final cast for the kind of protagonists, for Chloe Fraser, I've chosen Cara Delevingne, who kind of looks a bit like her in the game, but obviously has the British accent, and I think fits that role of Chloe Fraser. And then after this, I've got my original characters, so these will now be the villains.
Hmm.
So my first villain will be David Tennant. who is going to
Got a
be
really villainous picture of him as well.
it's a wicked picture from Good Omens where he plays Crowley. He's obviously an amazing actor. He's going to be the main villain. Then my first like secondary villain is going to be Elizabeth Debicki. So she's from probably most famous Guardians of the Galaxy 2. She plays the gold priestess.
For the Sovereign, yeah.
Yes,
She's also
that's
in
it.
Tenet. Christopher Nolan's
Yes,
Tenet.
she's in Tenet. Yeah, so she's in quite a few things you recognize from. So that she is going to play like, so David Tennant is the main villain. Elizabeth Debicki is going to be like the expert kind of historian person who's on the villain's team. So she's like the really smart one. And my last person is like the henchman, who is going to be Michael Rooker. So he is like the kind of classic, kind of dumb-ish, kind of comedic henchman, evil henchman kind of guy. So he's like kind of similar to his Yondu role a little bit. So he's gonna be the villain. And then of course my director, if Michael Rooker's in it, my director of course has to be James Gunn. Because obviously he's an amazing director and he just fit with this kind of world-spanning adventure movie with this huge, great cast. But you've got like, it's a bit like the Guardians of the Galaxy movie with a great heroes cast coming together to defeat these villains who have teamed up. So yeah, it's a James Gunn movie. We got, obviously he has to cast Michael Rooker in all his movies, so I have to have Michael Rooker in it. So to the actual pitch. So basically, what we're gonna start the movie pretty much exactly where Uncharted 4 ends. So if you play the game, you'll know right at the end, you play as Nate and Elena's daughter, and right then she finds a cupboard where, in like their beach house, where there's the artifacts from some of their adventures that they've had previously, and she finds out basically about their past a little bit and all the things they've done before. And then I think right at the end, Nate and Elena like walk in, they see her like finding the treasures, and Nate says, "Oh, I'll explain." Basically starts telling her about, there was this one time I found the lost city of El Dorado and blah blah blah. So mine's gonna go slightly differently. So as soon as like she discovers them artifacts, Nate's gonna like start explaining, and then he like hears a noise, and he looks to the side, and he looks out the window. And then he just before he can finish like explaining his story, he runs to Cassie and tells like, "Listen, you need to run, get to the end of the beach, get on your boat, and like get away from here as quick as you can." And he's like, "You need to, if we don't, we'll try and follow you. If we don't, you need to find Sully and ask him what to do." And she's like, "Whoa, what's happening? Like, what's gonna happen?" He's like, "No, listen, just do exactly what I'm saying." And so Nate like runs out. She runs out, grabs on a boat, just as these loads of like armed soldiers run in, and they like grab Nate and grab Elena. Obviously, Nate like tries to fight back, but he's not got any like weapons or anything with him. And then just as Cassie's getting on the boat, she's starting like the engine. It's just like getting away. She sees like the main villains kind of walking in, and David Tennant sees her and he shouts like, "Oh, get that girl before she escapes." So she jumps on a boat, and then we get like the soldiers chasing after her. And then there's like a boat chase, but she manages to get away because she knows like where she's going. Around like these islands on this boat, and they don't, so they just like crash their boats and she escapes. She then like hides on the boat for a bit, and it gets dark, and then she's like, like she kind of hides out in a little cove. Then she comes out and she's thinking like to herself, she's basically said that like, I can't abandon my parents, I need to go back for them. So she goes back to the house, but obviously all the soldiers and that are basically long gone. So she thinks, I'll walk inside and see, if I can find out where they've gone. So she sneaks into the house. It's like really dark. And then two guys like jump out and grab her, and she like turns around, and then she's like about to scream, and sees it's actually Sully and Sam who have come. So basically they tell her that there was like a panic alarm that Nate pressed, and they got it like from wherever they were. They basically come. It took them like the whole day to get there, but they eventually got there, and then she basically gets there just after them. So then she tells them like what she saw, and they got kidnapped, and she was like, "Oh, this British guy basically shouted to get me," and she describes him. And then Sully, because he's like the kind of been in the underground world and knows every kind of thief and con artist that's ever existed. He's like, oh yeah, I know who this guy is. Like a British guy dressed like this. Yeah, that's definitely this guy. So he basically says that's David Tennant. I'm just gonna call his character David. So he says he's David. I know, like I've run into him before, and I know someone who might know where he is. So basically, he's saying that because he's English, that obviously the person will know him will be Chloe Fraser, because she's English as well. So they basically then travel to England. They meet up with Chloe, and she basically tells them, "Oh, I've met this guy before. What he's after is Excalibur. He basically thinks that he's descended from royalty, but his family was kicked out of the British royal family. He thinks that he finds Excalibur, he can wield it, and he'll become king of England. Basically, that's his plan. So then they basically figure out that it was to do with Sir Francis Drake, who obviously like the whole every Uncharted game comes back to. He was part of like Queen Elizabeth's plan to keep Excalibur hidden. And basically there was notes in his book that some of them referred to it. So that's why he came and kidnapped Nate, because he knows he's got Sir Francis Drake's notes and he knows the most about him. So he kidnapped him to try and find where Excalibur was. So then basically we see that Cassie's obviously she's grown up with Nate and Elena. She's super smart on history. She helps Chloe kind of work out where they need to go to find Excalibur. Obviously, then like we see that Nate would know himself anyway because he's probably figured it out himself. So we skip to the villains. So we go to the villains, and there's some scenes showing them, and they've found these caverns where they're going to like find Excalibur. They're tracking it down. So basically, the villain's like threatening, like telling Nate that you better solve all these puzzles and stuff and get through these caverns, or we'll kill your wife. So they're working through these traps and stuff. And then there's like at one point like a collapse, like the cavern, like part of the cavern collapses. Like Nate does like a trap wrong, and he manages to like fight a couple of guards, and him and Elena kind of get away. We then go back to like the gang of heroes. So you got Sam, Sully, Chloe, and Cassie, and they've got to like the same place, and they're working through these caverns. And then basically there's a team where like they fall through some of the same traps, and Cassie's almost about to fall to like some spikes or something, and then Nate like jumps out and grabs her hand because he's escaped, and he's like working his way back for the caverns. They're working through the caverns. So they get saved. And then anyway, they reunite, and they're like, oh, we can't let David Tennant get Excalibur. We got to stop him before he does it. So they go through the caverns, but obviously because they're much smarter, they work their way much quicker through. And they find Excalibur eventually, and it's like stabbed into a stone. So obviously it's a sword in stone. So they're walking towards it, and then like Nate's about to like grab it and pull it out, and Chloe's like, "Whoa, you can't touch that." And he's like, "Why not?" He's like, "Doesn't it maybe like King of England?" And then he's about to like pull it out, and then like David Tennant appears and all his soldiers, and Marco Rocca, and he like they're like, "Whoa, I'll be taking that." And then so they like pull them all back at one point. David Tennant walks up, and he grabs Excalibur, and he like tries to pull it out, but he can't. Like he can't pull it from the stone. And he's like shocked because he thinks like, wait a second, I was descended from royalty, I deserve this sword, blah blah blah. And that's when like Michael Rooker turns around and just shoots David Tennant. And then he falls over and he's like, "Whoa, what's happening?" Like, he's like on the floor, like dying. He's almost had why you betrayed me. And then basically Elizabeth Debicki rolls over and she's like, "Oh, basically I lied to you. You're not really descended from royalty. You are literally just some nobody con artist." Like, and then she reveals that she is actually descended from royalty, and she thinks she can wield the sword, and she's like, there won't be a new king of England, there's going to be a new queen. So she's about to grab the sword, and then like that's when like the heroes will like break out, like Nate will do something or Cassie or whatever, and they'll like have a big fight with like the villains and like all the soldiers, and then during the fighting, like there's a bit where like Elizabeth Debicki's fighting with Elena, and she's about to like kill her, and then Cassie makes a run and she grabs the sword, and then everyone just and then pulls it, and then everyone like just turns like what? Like she pulls it out of the stone, and that gives like the heroes kind of a chance to like beat the bad guys because they're all a bit shocked. And then basically they win the fight. So it's kind of then like they get Excalibur, and then she's like, oh whoa, like, and then all the good guys, and then she's like, oh whoa, like, do I get to be like Queen of England now? And Chloe's like, no, put that back. I like the current queen as it is, and then they just put it back. And then basically they play Elizabeth, like, she's like, well, how can you can lift it and I couldn't because I'm royalty and you're not. And then I think Nate's like, he said, he's like, you didn't understand. To Francis Drake's notes, it's not about being royalty; it's about being worthy. So obviously she was worthy and she wielded it. And then basically, yeah, that's kind of the end. They wrap up like the bad guys and get them all together. And then I think the last scene is they're gonna be like rewarded by the Queen. Like Nate will be like knighted or something at Buckingham Palace. And they'll show that, and that's basically like our end scene. And then they kind of like go off into the sunset as they usually do in Uncharted.
Oh, cool. No, that was really good actually. I've got well, one thing, that last shot that you said with them all in Buckingham Palace getting knighted, you're absolutely missing a trick if someone doesn't steal something from Buckingham Palace. You know, if you got Sam there, you got Sully there.
Yeah, I know.
Someone definitely needs to steal the crown jewels or something.
I know. I do think that'd be good. A good end scene. If they're just walking away and it's like, oh, that was really good, and then you just hear like they're just shouting behind them. It's like, whoa, it's always been stolen, and then Sam's just like, yep, we gotta go.
Yeah, and then they could sort of uncover that it's they needed something for like the next treasure hunt, right?
Yeah, that would be pretty good.
That
So
really
the
cool.
next sequel.
Yeah,
that'd be wicked.
I mean, if I could, make one point. I thought one thing that I didn't like, just right at the end where Cassie pulls out Excalibur, and you sort of ended it like that. I feel like the Uncharted films, it's always sort of a misdirection, right? You start off thinking it's one treasure hunt, and it sort of unfolds to be another one. So
sometimes, but like most of the time, it's just revealed that the thing that they were chasing was true. Like that there are like the El Dorado thing was like the zombies. The Himalayan thing, I can't remember what that was. There was some kind of weird beast Yeti things or whatever. And the third one was in the desert, but I can't remember, some kind of ghosts. Yeah, I get that, but the whole thing was that Excalibur was real. The sword was real, and if you lift it, you can't instantly become king or queen of England, but you can only wield it like if you're worthy. Basically, is like the thing.
And I can't believe you didn't add I can't believe Excalibur wasn't booby trapped and they didn't have to make the Great Escape.
No, there was lots of booby traps to get through, to get to it. That was supposed to be the point. But yeah, so that's obviously like I kind of skipped over like what the traps and things would be. But a lot of the movie obviously is like the Uncharted bit. It's like the traps and them escaping from the bad guys and finding the bad guys, stuff like that. So a lot of that happens. But basically, just a lot of it is like the comedy and the bits of the characters would kind of carry the film, really.
Yeah,
like
you can imagine, obviously, with James Gunn directing as well. You can imagine sort of some of the scenery and like the intricate traps you mentioned as well.
Exactly. That's why I think James Gunn would just be such a wicked director. And with that cast kind of together, playing off each other, I think it'd just be awesome. Like just the great kind of. Just Brendan Fraser kind of as Sully, and then like Brett Dalton as Nate, kind of the joke quips just between them. And then Elena, and then you got Cassie, Sam, kind of a bit more straight, like kind of serious kind of guy, and then Chloe as well, like with the kind of trying to hold the team together, like be the smart one. And then the villains just like with David Tennant, Macaroka. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, they can hold themselves, right?
Yeah,
definitely. No, I mean, yeah, definitely really good. Cool. I think we went through a couple of really strong pictures then. So I think at this point, we sort of hand it over to the audience. Guys, leave comments, like, subscribe, let us know who you thought won, whose pitch did you prefer. Do you have your own pitch of a movie game sequel to promote some next gen games? Which next gen console are you interested in buying? Which one, Is there anything that could change your mind? If they came out with a fantastic Uncharted movie, would you switch from Xbox to PlayStation? Let us know. We really look forward to reading some of your comments and continuing this. Like we said, this is obviously episode 3, so we hope to be keeping up this sort of level of consistency with releasing some of these episodes. So definitely do get in touch and let us know what you'd like to see.
All right, see you next time, guys. Signing out for now.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.